Okay. Hello, everybody. Lenny, Della, Rocca here with Michael McInerney at the Miami Book Fair with Mr. Robert Haas. Mr. Haas, thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You're on a book tour? Is this because you have the little book of forms out?
Yeah, not really. I pretty much came here for
the fair. Okay, yeah. You've been here before, of course.
Yes, I have.
Okay. I didn't read the whole book yet, but I'm making my way through it, and it's a fascinating way. I've never seen anything like the book. I have it here somewhere. You kind of deconstruct all the way down to, you do the one line and then the couplet and then the tercet. And I think you said in the beginning there in the introduction something about this came about from doing a workshop or something.
Well, yeah, I was invited to teach a class at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and they said, "Would you teach the forms course?" And so I looked at books on what is form,
right?
And it was stuff about, how to write a sonnet or construct a double dactyl or something. It didn't have too much to do with the way most poetry gets written. So I tried to, well, where would you start? Well, you might start with one line, 2 lines, and then I started thinking, are there famous or wonderful 2-line poems? Well, I know I took high school Latin, so I knew at least one from high school, and so on. So that's how, and I did that 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
And a couple of years ago, my editor, Dan Halpern at HarperCollins, said, "Did you write a book about form?" And I said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." The students from the course, which I did this as handouts, were using them as handouts.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, well, maybe there's a book there. And so I went back and tried to think my way through the kind of the music of it. And when just after he had proposed this, and I was thinking, how do you do it? One of my grandchildren started talking kind of early. And one morning they were visiting. He came down to the kitchen, first one up, and I read him the comics. And he said, "Grandpa, if when my mom and dad get up, they want to go to the bakery, you can come." And I thought, this is about the energy of the shape of sentences. That's what he had down. He not only had down a conditional, but he had down complex sentence, and it led to sugar. And I thought that begins to work for me as a definition of form.
I just found it fascinating because I don't think I've ever, again, like you said, when you think of a book on form, how to write a sonnet, how do you do a sestina, what's a villanelle, what's all these. And these days, as much as free verse has been around for so long now and everybody's writing it, there's a whole lot of folks still writing in form. And I don't know, I find a lot of folks going to pantoums, and now it seems the popular thing is ghazal. How do you say ghazals or ghazals?
Yeah, I've heard it pronounced several different ways, and you have to do the Arabic.
Oh, okay.
But roughly it's guzzle.
Guzzle, okay. I had both ways wrong.
I think since guzzle sounds too much like the fraternities drinking beer,
it does.
Maybe we should say guzzle.
Guzzle. But I think if somebody mentions Robert Haas and form, the thing that comes straight to mind is the haiku, of course. Yeah. You've been known for writing haikus and talking about haikus, and I suspect you've probably taught the haiku. And I wonder what, and I'm sorry if you've been asked this a million times, but I wonder if you have sided on any one side of this whole question of you can't really have a haiku in English because, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the translation bit.
Yeah, there are. Well, I don't think I've really written a successful haiku, and I haven't tried too much, but I've tried to write some short poems. I heard William Merwin give a reading of these little beautiful 3-line poems about the Hawaiian landscape. And then the Q&A, somebody said, are those haiku that you wrote? And he said, no, they're not haiku. I'll give you my definition of haiku: a poem in 17 syllables in Japanese.
I guess so. So
there, I mean, I think it's a really appealing form, and good ones have been written in English by Richard Wright.
Really?
Have you come across
No,
these?
I have not.
You know, at the end of his life, he was living in France. He was hounded by the FBI because he'd been if not a party member, fellow traveler in the 30s. And then he wrote Native Son, which was such a dark book, and Black Boy, which is a very great book, but I don't think it's still got the honor that it.
Yeah.
But he was living in the countryside in France 3 years from his death, and though he didn't know it. And he came across R.H. Blyth's 4-volume history of haiku, and he fell in love with it. And he wrote, in the last years of his life, about 2,000 haiku.
Whoa!
His daughter edited a book of about 800 of them, and many of them have this problem that Merwin's remarkable. Yeah. They sound Japanesey.
Yes.
But many of them, including ones that remember his Southern childhood, which was a trauma, are really brilliant. So it can, and there are, of course, haiku societies.
Yes, of course. Yeah. It just seems to me that there's so many. I've read a lot of haiku that seems to me like they're just trying so hard to be a haiku, and they miss the mark. So I don't, over the years we've had discussions with different folks about, because you've got people saying, well, it's got to be in Japanese, and others saying no, and I've always wondered about. I've tried. I can't write a haiku worth anything.
Paul Muldoon, who's here, and who's fiendishly clever writer, did a series called the Hopwell Haiku when he was living in Hopwell, New Jersey. Okay. And he did them in 3 lines, so the first and the third line rhymed.
Wow.
And they're really very witty and smart. The great ones to me are Gary Snyder did a group in the 60s called Hitch Haiku.
I've read a couple of them.
And one of them goes, a 16-wheeler lit up like a town just rolled by me in the desert night. So it's like desert dark, here comes Western civilization, and then desert dark, stars. If you could just it would be like, don't you wish you could step aside and just let 2016 to 2020 go by?
Oh yeah.
Stars.
It's funny how that's come up a few times.
Smell of sage.
You introduced me to a startling haiku at the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. Something along the lines of "Year after year, on the monkey's face."
A monkey's face. Yeah, it's a wonderful poem. Basho is really great poet.
Who are you reading these days? Are you reading anybody in particular? Whether it's poetry or fiction or anything else?
At the moment, what I'm reading is a new novel by a woman named Linda Spalding, who's Kansas-born and became a Canadian citizen. And her last novel, which was called The Purchase, was about her Quaker ancestors at the end of the 18th century. This Quaker guy whose wife has died takes in a Presbyterian, he's got 4 kids, he takes in a Presbyterian teenager to take care of the kids. And the elders of his church, this is page 1, so say, you're creating scandal you can't live with. Right? And he says, screw it. And he takes off into what was then the Virginia wilderness, into the Blue Ridge. And the novel, and when he arrives, this fervent Quaker, in an accidental way, acquires a slave, which is deeply against his conscience. But he needs the help of the work, and he's used his money for this purpose. Right. So that novel is about this family playing out. This new book that I've just started is called, God, I can't think of the name of it at the moment, is about the next generation going into the Virginia wilderness. It's again about the slave families, and it's not written like Faulkner, but it's written in short chapters, and it reminded me of Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, just my idea of one of the supreme. Yes, because it moves from character to character, this complicated way. Two brothers with their father's inheritance of farms. The farms are failing. There was the first exhaustion of the cotton soil. The hypocrisy of the kinds of intermarriage with the slaves. And she just writes so. It's like it's maybe I'm trying to think of the filmmaker. It's intensely visual book. So, and I'm loving that book. Before that, the book I was reading that I'm excited by, that I think everybody should read, is The Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh. You know of him? He's an Indian novelist, and it's an environmental book. Okay. With the kind of India-centric, it's world about, but it's the smartest book about our imaginations and climate change that I've read. It's very exciting.
You mentioned that this author, she became a Canadian citizen. Yeah. Is that something she's done recently?
I don't
Do you know, or is
I think
I mean, in other words, is it on the footsteps of what's going on
I think
politically
she's
here?
Michael Ondaatje's partner, and I think they met in Hawaii when she was living there, and she moved to Canada. Okay. And together they founded a press and a literary magazine. Yeah. And she's written, raised her kids there, and had written several novels there. So,
what you know, you've won. How many awards? I mean, you've got, you know, you've got the Oscar, you've got the Emmy, you've got you've accomplished a whole lot. Is there anything else for you? I mean, is there anything that you haven't done in your career that you would like to still strive for?
Oh yeah, I feel like I feel like I'm not there yet.
No, come on.
I'm really serious about it. I looked at several of my mentors' figures, like Galway Cannell. Okay. I thought, once you had written the Book of Nightmares, you could say, okay, I've done what I was born to do. I don't feel that.
Really?
I don't at all feel that. So
we just had Mr. Simic in here, and I said the same thing, and I said, you're like one of our elder statesmen of poetry in this country, really. Yeah. So, you know, I imagine that this is something that I don't know. You would think, okay, I've done this and I've done that and I've read here and I've done that and I've published that, and you would think, okay, what else would there might be? But if you had to go back and didn't do poetry, is there something else that you might have gone off and done? Do you think?
Done with
with your career instead of poetry? Would you be a painter?
Well,
would you be?
No, it never actually quite felt like a career. Okay. To me, it felt like I was trying to practice this art, and there are now quite well-defined career shapes, mainly to do with getting jobs in academia. Yeah, I mean, young poets now. If I say, you know, you don't, this manuscript needs work. Yeah, and don't worry about it. Wallace Stevens was 40 when he published Harmonium. Yeah. Take all the time you need. Yes. But right now it's not ready. Yeah. And they will say, well, I'm coming up for tenure. So, yeah. When I went to graduate school because I looked at my professors and thought, you get to teach in a park and you get 3 months off. It just seemed like a thing to do. Yeah. I wanted to write, but I thought it was my own business, not connected to my profession, which was to be a literature teacher. So, and there was no pathway then. Okay. I think there were 2 creative writing programs in the country. Charlie and I were talking about this last night. He thought there was only one, Iowa, but I was where Stanford had one as well. But so it didn't quite feel like a career. But I now do feel like the shape of the body of work.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend, a novelist friend, who says his nightmare is that he's going to die and get to heaven, and as soon as he enters, Van Gogh and Shakespeare and Robert Bresson, the filmmaker, and Dostoevsky are going to be sitting there playing pinochle, and they're going to look up and say, "You spent too much time watching television." You know? So I feel like there were periods in my life when I didn't work hard enough.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I mean, I did other things. I wanted to be a decent parent, and et cetera.
Very important. Yeah.
But I feel like I was not, didn't. Also, I spent 25 years translating Czesław Miłosz's poems with him. You know, he's my neighbor in the Berkeley Hills, and he was a warrior and driven.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and thought, "You're a dilettante," compared to him.
Yeah.
Because he thought, by the end of his life, having witnessed so much destruction, he thought, if I don't describe the 1910 hairdo of my piano teacher in Vilnius in the late 1920s, when she looked exactly out of fashion to me because it had been the fashion of my mother's generation. If I don't describe it, nothingness wins. He just thought he was the enemy of being going down the drain, and it filled him with rage. And so, my attitude, looking back on my own writing life, I can think of several abandoned projects. If I just stayed with it, I could have done that. I could have done that.
Yeah.
But of course, there's nothing to do except to keep going.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it was interesting with Charlie. I mean, this arc of it, because the prose he's writing now, the essays he's writing, are, you know, he's almost 80.
Yeah.
The last 5 years, talk about somebody at the top of their form.
Yeah.
It's found a way that there's going to be at some point a little book of that wry, smart, detached, humane, acute sense of the absurd.
Yes.
Comes from growing up, his early memories of the war and the violence in Serbia.
Yeah.
That kind of flows through his work as a kind of touchstone knowledge.
Right.
You know.
You had a couple of short little adjectives about his work. Do you have a couple of short little adjectives about yours? About your work?
Mine? Oh, no.
You wouldn't?
I don't think so.
No?
Yeah.
Are there any poets, young poets, contemporary poets coming up that you think that you may know, and maybe you don't, I don't know, that are deserve more recognition?
Well, all poets think
Oh,
they
come
deserve
on.
more recognition. I think I may be the only poet in America who doesn't think he deserves more recognition. I think, you know, it's an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing the work, I'm sure you've experienced it too. So, sometimes you feel like what you're doing is so powerful, and then this little thing. Miłosz has a saying about these. Some nights I felt like I had done it. And in the morning, I would read what I wrote and see that I had been beaten back into the pen of literature.
Yeah, that's... Because I wonder just, you know, if you, I don't know, sometimes I imagine maybe you're sitting somewhere in the morning and you're flipping through, you know, the latest issue of XYZ, whatever, poetry journal or whatever, and come across somebody that you think, hey, you know, this young lady, this young man has got something going on here. There seems to be a very high, you know, we had a young man, I don't know if you've, his name is Chen Chen. We interviewed him yesterday, 28 years old.
Yeah.
And I just thought his stuff is just so astounding at such a young age.
How do you spell his name?
Chen.
Chen Chen.
And his work is just so bristling, and it just pops out. And I thought, you know, and he's so young, and I just thought, there's so many young folks writing today that have this caliber, I think, at such an early age.
Yeah.
You know,
no, the quality is very high. It's true.
I don't know where the heck that comes from. Whether it's because you can't teach that, right? I mean, that's something you either have or you don't.
You can't teach it, but I think that you know, it's like if you only play tennis against really good tennis players.
There you go. Chess too.
That there is, I mean, there are arguments back and forth about the pervasive creative writing culture, but one thing it means is that kids are confidently exposed to poetry at 18.
Yeah.
I mean, I never took a creative writing class because they didn't exist.
Do you remember the first time you came across poetry as a kid? What your first experience with poetry was?
Well, it was my grandmother reciting it.
Oh, okay.
It was the first thing, or nursery rhymes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then I mean, that's another story.
Yeah.
I do have those memories, but about the young poets, it's true. The level of work is very high. I feel like I should be able to rattle off the names of 2 or 3 younger poets, and I can't at the moment because I've been reading. My students are now the middle generation.
Yeah.
Of poets. So,